Hello, this is my artistic praxis step 5 reflection project. And I did my project on teaching performance feedback for undergraduate students. So I worked with the students on my dance company. We're an educational outreach dance company called BYU Connect. And we go out to elementary schools and perform a lecture demonstration on a specific theme and then teach creative dance workshops throughout the rest of the school day. So the students are in rehearsal at the same time that they are also taking a pedagogy course to learn how to teach creative movement in an elementary classroom. So I wanted to know, when they have their first teaching experiences in the elementary school, what kind of feedback protocols on their teaching performance would be preferred by the students and what works for them. Oops, wrong direction. Backwards. My concept or question was, how do undergraduate students prefer to receive feedback on their teaching performance? And I did a little bit of a lit review and found a great article that looked at 10 different, it was a meta-analysis of 10 different studies on performance feedback. And I wanted to know, do the students want immediate feedback? Do they want feedback from their peers? Do they want it written down? Do they want it given to them verbally? So in the article that I found, it talked about immediate feedback being the best thing to change teaching behavior. It says immediate feedback has the best chance of changing specific teaching behavior and should be specific, positive, and corrective. And that really, this was the number one thing that came out of the article, is that if you really want to change teaching practice, immediate feedback. Immediacy is the most important part of the feedback. Peer feedback, they only studied or found one well-designed study on who delivers feedback to teachers, and they weren't able to get any definitive information really about what's more effective, a peer giving feedback or their supervisor, which I thought was interesting because I felt like the social aspect of peer feedback was really important, could possibly be important to my students. Written or verbal. In the article that I read, nothing was identified in their meta-analyses about the medium of the feedback, but I wanted to know if they preferred written or verbal, because I have a co-teacher who teaches the class with me who I think her natural form of feedback is conversation, and my natural form of feedback is to write written. So I thought this would be a good time to compare those strategies. So for my design, in creating the project, I knew that we would have our first 2 teaching experiences during the course of this class. And that was March 22nd and March 29th. We had full-day residencies at elementary schools in the Salt Lake Valley. And the first residency, I was going to provide written notes to the students immediately after the residency, and then also have a conversation with each student that I watched immediately after they taught. Then on March 29th, when we went to the second school, they were given an assignment to critique and provide feedback for each other. And then after that, they were supposed to complete a survey on what they prefer after they experienced that. So with creation, I did give the students immediate verbal feedback after I watched them teach, and I gave them immediate written feedback a few hours after they taught, and then my co-director and co-teacher gave written feedback a few days after they had taught. The second residency, because I share the class with my co-director, the timing got a little off on how this project was conducted, and the students gave peer feedback online, but they didn't receive the peer feedback before they completed a survey of what they preferred in terms of receiving performance feedback. So on the survey, I didn't include, I didn't analyze anything about what they preferred about peer feedback or instructor feedback, because they didn't have peer feedback to think about. So In the survey, though, I did find, in terms of the medium of the feedback, that 67% of the students preferred written feedback and 33 preferred conversation. A lot of them justified this preference by saying they just like having the written feedback because they can go back to it when they want, and it helps them not forget the things that were said or suggested, and they liked that. I should mention that there's only 12 students on the company and in the class, so that's what the sample size is. The timing of feedback was really interesting. The majority do prefer feedback immediately, like the study that I read had suggested, but I was also, I guess I wasn't really surprised to see how many of the students wrote about their emotional responses to feedback and sort of preferring more space between when they perform and when they receive the feedback to manage their emotional responsibility in terms of receiving feedback. So I thought that was really interesting. So with revision, what I would do differently is give them this survey earlier, maybe even before they get any feedback, so that they can just, I mean, everybody has experiences with feedback. So I think they could have filled out the first survey and said, I prefer immediate feedback, or I prefer it a few days later, just based on knowledge of themselves, of their own personality and their experiences with feedback in the past. So I would definitely like to give a survey like that to my students at the beginning of the course. And then I would, if I continued this project, and I mean, I'm still curious, so I'll ask this question, but ask the students about how they feel about peer feedback, if it's helpful or not, or if it just feels like an assignment and they aren't finding any value in it, or maybe they're finding value in providing their peers with feedback, but not finding it as valuable to receive it from their peers. So finally, in reflection, I am still considering and percolating in my mind how I can differentiate performance feedback strategies, because when I first received the survey, I was a little overwhelmed by how many different needs the students had and how much variety there was in what they preferred. I prefer immediate, but I want it written, or I want it a few days later, but I want it verbal. And differentiation is always a struggle and can be really hard in a classroom, but maybe I thought, you know, before we do a residency and go teach in the school, students could give me a little ticket that is kind of their feedback order, like when you put in an order at a restaurant, or an order online, and just say, today, you know, I would like you to come and watch me and talk to me immediately after, or today I'd like you to come and watch and then write up notes to give me a few days later. And maybe taking orders like that for 12 students really could be manageable. And then it could allow them to change preferences over time. I also felt that in this survey that their responses may not be so static as what you collect in a survey. They could be a little bit more complex in reality. And in their justifications of why they preferred immediate feedback or written feedback, they did address more complex issues. And yeah, I'm exploring that idea. And then feedback protocols. Stephanie gave me great feedback on the importance of putting positive praise at the beginning and then sandwiching the critique with more positive